Hello and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're all having a very nice Friday. This will be going up. Happy weekend, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I've read so far in September. So for some reason, today I'm filming this on the 12th of September on Thursday. I've read 10 books this month already, which is amazing, like really, really amazing, and really, really a lot for me to be sort of not even halfway through the month and I've read 10 books. And I'm not talking like little baby books, I'm talking big guys. So I thought I would do 2 wrap-ups this month, one now and one at the end of the month. Which I quite like doing. Although I say I quite like doing, I do like the neatness of just one wrap up, but when you've got all this many books to wrap up, you don't want to be flying through them. So let's crack on and let's start with the audiobooks that I've read. In fact, I'm going to turn that light on and then I'll be back with the audiobooks that I've read. I'm not sure how much actual difference that's made, but it's on now. So I will start with the first audiobook that I listened to this month, earlier on this month, and that was The Language of Kindness, A Nurse's Story by Christy Watson. This is a book that we were reading for my book club at work, and I listened to the audiobook of this because Cara, who I share an office with, said that she had listened to the audiobook of it as well, and I just thought, oh, I'd fancy giving that a go. Actually, I've got the actual book of it. I can just show you what it looks like. Here it is, The Language of Kindness, A Nurse's Story. So this is sort of like in the similar vein to that of This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. It is a memoir and a record of Christy Watson's life as a nurse. I'm going to put that down now. Put that away. And I've got to say, very eye-opening, very sort of, very much a focus on care and caring, whereas the focus on the Adam Kay book was sort of like how much the NHS is up shit's creek, and the sort of humour and comedy. Not so much humour and comedy here, which I feel like, because I'd enjoyed This Is Going to Hurt so much, and could familiarise myself with the NHS that I worked in, this was much more sort of tailored to sort of maternity services, which is a department I've never worked in, psychiatric services, which is a department I've never worked in, and social care, which again was a department that I've not worked in. I've worked in quite a few places within the NHS, but none of those departments. And yeah, I just, there was something about it. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I didn't hate it. Excuse me. I didn't hate it, but I just feel like I kept comparing it the whole way through to This Is Going to Hurt. I feel like it's definitely an eye-opener, and there's a lot of these memoirs out there now to sort of like exposés almost on what the NHS is like, the inner workings and things. And yeah, I just think there's I enjoyed This Is Going to Hurt more, but that's not to say it wasn't bad. I gave it 3 stars. That's very good. The next book I read was, I'm continuing listening to the audiobooks of the Cormoran Strike series. I've finished the second one, which is called The Silkworm, which of the 4 that have been released so far has always been my least favourite, and continues to be my least favourite, but that's not to mean that it's not terrible. I still liked it. I gave it 4 stars. It's very gutty. There's lots of like guts, actual guts, and like quite a lot of sort of like describing violence and things like that. However, I really, really have been enjoying the process of re-listening to these, knowing where the storyline's going, so knowing how Robin and Strike's relationship and business progresses. Also, there's something to be said about reading a thriller or a crime book and knowing who's done it, because you can really, particularly with these, with the Cormoran Strike series, which have got so many red herrings and so many different like things going off, and you don't even know. It's really fun to reread them knowing who done it, because you can sort of like pick out little things earlier on, and I've really, really, really been enjoying that. And once I've got a few audiobooks to listen to now for various book clubs, but I'm going to be moving on to Career of Evil, which is the 3rd in the series, as soon as I get a chance. But so those are the 2 audiobooks that I've listened to. The books that I've got here, and as I said, they're not tiny little books. There are some tiny little books in here, but they're not all tiny little books. The first one I read was Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This is a book that's been on my radar for such a long time. It's very sort of beloved of BookTube, and I've seen it a lot on Instagram and things like that. I discovered Dolly Alderton through podcasts. She does a podcast called The High Low with a friend, a journalist friend of hers, Pandora Sykes. And I enjoy listening to that. You get a lot of recommendations and things like that. And she also does a podcast called Love Stories with Dolly Alderton, where she talks about all different types of love, from like unrequited love to first love and things like that. And what I really liked about this was that this wasn't just a book about your traditional sort of, I love my mum so much, I love my husband so much. It really sort of like winded and went all the way around all different types of love. There was bits in this, I feel like this could have been a 5-star for me, but there was a little much too there was a little tiny bit, and like this is such a small thing, but it just glamorized the sort of like drug, alcohol, smoking cigarettes lifestyle just a little bit for me, because I feel like if it hadn't have been like that, because obviously these are experiences she's had, so she's going to mention them, but I just felt like it glamorized it a little bit. I really like, what I will say is that she doesn't have your sort of, like I said earlier, your traditional sort of like the love that she's got. I have to be really careful with what I'm saying here, because obviously I do care very deeply about a lot of people in my life, but the people that she has like this burning love for are people like her best friend, which I can completely understand. And yeah, it's just, I really loved, I could see myself in here in a lot of her loves, and I don't really want to say any more than that without getting a bit too deep, but yeah, I really enjoyed it, really reasonable, readable, and was reluctant to finish it actually, really enjoyed it, so 4 stars for that. The next one I read was Funny Girl by Nick Hornby. This is a book about a young girl called Barbara Parker. She's crowned Miss Blackpool in 1964, and she wants to live a life working in comedy and working in TV, and she ends up getting a part on a show, and you sort of see what it's like at that time to be a woman who's the star of a show, and she completely is the star of the show. The show is called Barbara in brackets and Jim, so he's, and the guy who plays Jim is quite a personality and very egocentric, so yeah, you get to see the behind the scenes of her sort of working with the script writers, her lifestyle, her relationship with her father. Her mother died, no, her mother didn't die, sorry, her mother left her father and her when she was quite young, and yeah, I found it fine. I gave it 2 stars. It was an enjoyable run. Like, it was peppered with, when I flicked through it, I was like, oh, this is exciting. It's got like little bits of script and stuff like that, and I just feel like it could have done without them, like little pictures and stuff like that. That didn't really bring anything to the story for me, but yeah, I gave it 2 stars. Fine, I'm just slotting them up there under my camera. The next one I read was If Only by Melanie Murphy. So this is women's contemporary fiction, otherwise known as chick lit. If you've been around on this channel for any amount of time, you'll know that this is not my favourite genre, and this continues to not be my favourite genre. I read this because I'd heard a wonderful review of it, and I feel like if you're into chick lit, then this is something that you may well love. I really like the sort of spin on it, in that there's a bit of sort of like time travel within there. If you've watched the film About Time, I feel like that is quite similar to the time travel that happens in here. She can go back to a certain point within her life, if she says, if only I hadn't done this. But yeah, it was just a bit too much sort of like hero worship for the first for the main character, who was seriously flawed, but I feel like if you're into women's contemporary fiction, then this is going to be one that you will very much enjoy. So yeah, I gave that 2 stars as well. The next book was also a 2 stars, and that was Stargazing by Kate Thompson. As you may know, I got a few of these out of the library. These are just little tiny Irish novellas. This was quite a cute little story, like literally nothing in there to upset. It was just a sort of a moral tale of what you see on the surface isn't always what's going on, and it's about a woman who works in a florist, and she wins a competition to go to a soap, to watch one of her favourite soaps, an episode of that be filmed and be in an extra in it, and she's talking to the members, the cast members, who she absolutely worships, and she's finding out that their lives aren't quite as wonderful as the media presents them to be, and how they've actually look at her life and think what a wonderful life she's got. So yeah, just very cute. 2 stars. There we go. The next one was a 5-star book, and this was The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a novel told in verse, about a young girl called Xiomara, and she lives with her very religious mother and father, and she has a twin who is a very high achiever, and she is sort of she feels like she's being a bit erased, I guess, by her lifestyle, and she discovers poetry and slam poetry, and she also discovers boys, and I really like this. It was really true and honest, and like the thoughts she was having as like a young teenager were the sort of like sexual thoughts I was having as a young teenager, and I absolutely admire and am always astounded by books that are written in verse that manage to get so much across in such like a small amount of time. So for instance, like I read this when because I was reading this book at the time when I filmed my At the Moment video, and I read out this passage, and I've got to read out this passage again. So this is her twin brother's given her a notebook for her birthday, and she's writing down her poetry into them, and it says, "Late into the night I write, and the pages of my notebook swell from all the words I've pressed onto them. It almost feels like the more I bruise the page, the quicker something inside me heals." And it's just full of like beautiful, beautiful writing like that, with a fantastically engrossing storyline. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So 5 stars, would definitely recommend. However, from a 5-star book to a 1-star book, I gave this 1 star. And even now, because I don't often give away 1 stars, because I don't often get to the end of 1-star books, but there was some sort of like grim fascination in this book that I kept going. This is Adele by Layla Soleimani. This is translated from the French by Sam Taylor. You follow Adele, who has she's very bored of her life. She's got a son and a husband. Her husband is a surgeon. Her son is a right old handful, a young son, and you follow her life. And on the side of this, she's bored, but she's got quite a violent sex addiction, which involves sort of a gripping need to have sex or have sexual encounters of some point with anyone. It doesn't matter who. She puts herself in awful danger, but also quite violent sex. So it's got some really violent sex scenes in there, which I don't feel like I was fully prepared for. I know this is a book about sex, about a woman with a sex addiction, but I wasn't fully prepared for those. I also really didn't like the way it's told in 3rd person, and I really didn't like the way it's sort of like, Adele does this. Adele puts her hand on Lauren's shoulder, gets up to her feet and goes up to her bedroom. Adele gets into bed, rubs her feet together and sinks into a death-like sleep. Richard, she hears, like, it's just, there's a lot of like, it just feels very, Adele did this, Richard did that, she watched Richard do this, and it just, the writing style wasn't for me. I really didn't like the storyline. I felt like it was left with some sort of like ambiguous ending that because I'd not enjoyed these books so much, the ambiguous ending was not an ending I wanted, and yeah, I gave it 1 star. I really didn't enjoy it. However, it was a thriller, and I was hoping to read a thriller in this autumn period, so that is at least one thing that I've ticked off of my sort of like books that I wanted to read. But yeah, I did not enjoy this, sadly. Really did not enjoy that. The next one though was a book that I did enjoy. This was The Handmaid's Tale. This is the graphic novel of The Handmaid's Tale, written by Margaret Atwood, and this is the art and adaptation is done by Renee Nolte. I actually bought this for my sister for her birthday, but knowing that the Testaments was coming out this month, I'm reading it at the moment, and I'm really engrossed. It's so gripping and so terrifying, and yeah, I'm finding it absolutely amazing. I wanted to familiarise myself with The Handmaid's Tale before I got round to reading the Testaments, and I looked at my copy of The Handmaid's Tale and I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to get that all read by the time that the Testaments come out, and I know I'm going to want to pick up the Testaments literally as soon as it comes through my door. So I remembered that I'd bought my sister The Handmaid's Tale, the graphic novel edition, and I went and borrowed it off of her and read it in just over a day. I've got to say, really am impressed with how much of the story, I mean, when it's written by Margaret Atwood, obviously it's going to stick to the story, but like I really like the artwork. I really like the way it was presented. I just found it like as enjoyable as the book. Enjoyable is the wrong word when you're describing the the Handmaid's Tale, but like as the experience of it was as good as the book for me. So yeah, would definitely recommend. And if you've got fans of the Testaments, then this would be a great one to the Testaments or the Handmaid's Tale. This would be a great one to buy. And then the last one I've got is a tiny little book, and that is No One Is Too Small to Make a Difference by Greta Thunberg. What I will say about this, I gave this 3 stars, and that's not a reflection on the stuff that's in here, because I wholeheartedly agree with Greta Thunberg and how we need to make some changes now before this planet goes to complete shit. But for me, I feel like you would be better off watching her perform these speeches online, because a lot of them are repeating. So like almost every one starts, my name is Greta Thunberg, I'm 15-year-old and I'm from Sweden, I speak on behalf of da-da-da, and there's a lot of the same, because these are all her speeches, so there's a lot of like recycled stuff. There's a lot of like imagery of a house being on fire, and what would you do if your house was on fire, and how she's too, everyone keeps telling her she's too young, and etc. It's just, there's a lot of repetition in here. That's not to say it's not important stuff, but it is a lot of repetition. I actually saw Sophie from Portal in the Pages review this and say the same, and I think she did the same as me, which was literally sit down and read it. So maybe if I'd been sort of like spacing them out a little bit, it might have been a bit better, but I gave it 3 stars because I feel like you could watch, following reading this, I watched some of her speeches online and I got much more from watching them online than I did from reading this. However, I don't know if any proceeds of this goes to anything. Maybe it doesn't, but yeah, 3 stars. So those are the books that I've read so far in the month of September. Very, very good reading month so far. I hope you're all having a lovely time. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know what you've got planned to read for the rest of the month, and I will see you all again soon for another BookTube video. Goodbye!